Back with the silver Jubilee. Here's the improved lead dress, so I don't think I'm quite done on the first grid. Here's a picture of the before for comparison. Now, I've got the preamp down and the master all the way up on the clean channel, and there's still a bit of a buzz. And that's with some new preamp tubes, and it's less with the new preamp tubes, but it's still there. And chasing it down. Now, if I bring the preamp gain up, there's a different buzz, a different kind of buzz. Not just white noise, but a buzz. And if I come anywhere close to that grid, it gets worse. But if I touch the chassis with this at the same time, it almost completely goes away. And the farther, if I can keep the grid down against the chassis while touching the chassis, that buzz goes. So that tells me that this wire would certainly benefit from shielding. And I suspect that this wire would as well. And that would probably take care of that remaining buzz we're having in the circuit. Let's see here. That helps. So this wire and this wire need to be shielded. This grid wire here is shielded. This one's not necessary, but it is up against the chassis. And the grids in the phase inverter don't need to be shielded, though I have routed them farther away. They are routed farther away from the heater grids. I'm going to move this one grid here, this green wire, so that it approaches from the other side and doesn't even come this close to these heaters. I'll show you one other fun thing in this amp. This amp has a half power switch, which just runs, that's what they call it, high power and low power. What it really does is it changes the output tube behavior from pentode to triode. So everything you've heard so far has been in pentode mode. Switch it to the low power, the triode, and you hear that hum. And that little bit of crackle as it changes. It's a bad switch. And if I go in here and press on this lug right here, I can make that hum go away. We don't have a perfect connection from here to here when the switch is engaged like this. I have to manually press it. So the switch itself is faulty. I'm going to take it out of humming triode mode for now. I'll get another switch, but I want to point out that these switches, in fact all switches, are rated for high voltage AC use, 125 volts, 250 volts AC, at 3 to 6 or 10 amps depending on the switch you use. But that none of these switches are rated for high DC voltage, 30 volts DC, not the 500 or so that's on here. 400 something. There are no switches that are used in guitar amps that are rated for high voltage DC. And they're used for standby switches and things like that. And in this case, a pentode triode switch. And those switches which are subjected to high voltage DC often fail. Now the standby switch in this Marshall, like others, has AC on it because you're actually switching the HT secondary from the power transformer. So this switch will last. And the power switch has AC, 125 volts here, 240 in Europe, and that tends to last. But this one, which is switching 400 something volts DC, has failed, which is typical. So I'll get a new switch. Fortunately, it's still a fairly standard issue rocker. I can get that switch, though a lot of the ones on the market are just the single throws like this. I need the double throw for this. I advise never to use the triode mode because even when it's not humming, it doesn't sound very good. But I don't want to send an amp out into the world that someone can do that and have that hum happen, or sometimes it's worse. It needs to be like that. Anyway, so Given that these wires are coming from the board where there is not a shield end, I think I will do the same thing that they did here and connect the shield to the cathode here and here, which should work just fine. It's close enough to ground. You can also shield to B+. B+ will work very nicely for shielding, but there is always the chance that something will go amiss when you introduce higher voltages into the mix. It's also possible that when I lift this board up, there'll be a nice ground trace on the bottom where I can't see it right now, where I could connect a shield to that, or there are other ways to do it. But I think once these two wires these two green grid wires are shielded, that buzz should go away, because there's no fun having a very loud Marshall with a very loud. All right, I've replaced the green grid wires with shielded, which are referenced to the cathode, shielded to cathode rather than ground. I redid this ground connection, both the chassis, and resoldered it. And there's still a bit of a buzz. And it's driving me a little bit nuts. It's possible that it's one of the diodes in the switching circuit in this amp. It's a more convoluted preamp than a lot of Marshalls, but the buzz is greatly reduced. But it's still very susceptible to my hands being near things. Now that's, if I were to play like right now, that'd be very, very loud. That was with both masters up. We go down to a more realistic playing level on the dirt, and we'll see where the relationship of buzz to music is. And some of that you're hearing is because the pickups are so close to the transformers. That's a separate issue. But it is too late to turn it up past that. And this amp doesn't really come alive with the master volume that low. So tomorrow I'll do some more testing to see if that hum and buzz is more acceptable. This Marshall, like most Marshalls, has some ground errors from the factory. Right now they've been carefully cleaned and redone. It's not how I would ground this, but I've had these in the past that were quiet, so I'm going to revisit my notes and maybe something will occur to me. I almost forgot to say on this high-low power switch, the pentode triode switch, I spoke to the owner and explained that this switch is not available from any of my usual vendors, and I have an awful lot of usual vendors for amps, and it's not a common Marshall part. And it's if I can find one, it'll be a relatively expensive switch, and the amps don't sound good in triode mode. And so the least expensive, best sounding option was just for me to wire it like this, so it's always in pentode mode and cannot be switched to the bad sounding humming triode mode. So a very easy solution